Pamsoroi muri eZimbabwe ngokuzithoba ngiyazehlisa kini mthwakazi. All protocols observed. The situation in our country, whose foundation is shaky, has reached yet another level, and take caution to this clarion call. In quest for our freedoms, democracy and justice, death is the debt which all men must pay if it be the price for our human rights. I observe reverence Kumandoro Dzenyika in their hierarchy, and a moment of silence to the gallant fallen heroes and heroines of this country who sacrificed their lives. Background. From the Berlin Conference of 1884 said to colonization, the British Union flag, known as the Union Jack, was hoisted at Fort Salisbury on 13 September 1890, led by the Pioneer Column, a force raised by Cecil John Rhodes, a prime minister between 1890 to 96, founding De Beers Consolidated Mines in 1888, by a royal charter from Queen Victoria to his mercantile British South Africa Company, known as the BSAC. Military advisors estimated 2,500 Pioneer Corps with £1 million budget could win the war, in addition to pledged 1,200 hectares of land and 15 mining claims, equivalent of 8.5 hectares, to which astonishingly Frank Johnson, by aid of Frederick Selous, undertook the mission for £87,500 and mere 250 soldiers, with De Beers mining 90% of world's diamonds by 1891. Resistance. Economic marginalization, racial segregation, disfranchisement, political repression and suppression, native affairs, Law and Order Maintenance Act, and Emergency Powers Act, loss of land, Kekro, natural calamities, hard taxation of 1884, with draconian laws in measure, triggered resistance movements with special envoys Chiwa and Gonda coordinating instructions from the sacred shrine to chiefs for uprisings with signals of fire as sea trap passed from hill to hill. Deployed 80,000 spearmen and 20,000 riflemen in 1893 to 1894 under the command of King Lobengula in Machiavelli First War, succumbed in Bekru to a crack commando of less than 1,000 BSAPs, disguised as hunters and missionaries. Collaboration of Mkwati from the Tabozga Mambo, the site of the last Zimbabwe of the Mambos. Tenkela Wamponga, Salvazana from the Njelele, made a Trinitarian command in Boydment with Kumbore Shumba, medium of Kagubi I, for simultaneous outbreaks and revolts on 25th of March 1896, First Chimurenga. Revolution. Phase 1, between 1966 to 1970, focused on disrupting law and order, with Zanda forces ambushed by regime forces intending to sabotage the Kariba Dam's hydroelectricity output, with concurrent uprisings across the continent. Phase 2, between 1971 and 1973, prioritized clandestine countryside infiltration, raising peasant awareness, self-reliance in recruitment, training and logistics, establishing the process of seizing power, constitutional development, and preparing for a protracted hit-and-run war to exhaust and liquidate the Smith regime. Phase 3, between 1974 to 1979, entailed a protracted intensification of military action by Zipra forces downing a Viscount plane in the Kariba area, whilst Zanda bent petrol tanks in Salisbury to destruction of state infrastructure. Guerrilla's geopolitical situation improved with Mozambique's 1975 independence, with ability to expand the war, institutionalize ethos of purposeful transformation to its liberated zones. Pillars of power. Tsvimbo Dzenyika is not a myth or secret, but sacred, with traditional protocols to be adhered in regards for any successorship, revolution, and overhaul of autocratic systems. Mondoro Dzenyika, in order of hierarchy and relevance, converse with the spirit mediums, taking command of first and second Chimrenga, frustrating Britain to conduct research on supernatural acts employed to stop the movement. Lemba are the custodians of the Ark of the Covenant, with priesthood lineage from Azarias, the son of Zadok, having migrated with their mambo, Maibire, whom they preserved. President Robert Gabriel Mugabe was the last curator of complete sacred records, being royal bloodline, with 26 generations from him to Tion Murenga Fumojena Sororenzo, the father of immortal Chaminuka I, Kagubi, Mushavatu, Runji, and Nehanda, who migrated AD 940 from the Ghost Kingdom among the Watembudzi, descending Lower Kush, with Sabi as compass. Being son of Patriarch Maibire, preserved among the Shewa, of direct lineage of Kingdom of Aksam, with 130 generations to Mondoro Tovera, who has 18 generations from his first ancestor, which becomes 185 generations from Mugabe. Moyendizo lineage from Jembeo, son of Senwa, the daughter of Churumutapa, with Negupo, is matriarchal, with higher order being different. Paspamire of 1883 was medium to first Chaminuka, the father of Kutamadzoka and Chingwangu, alias Ruswingo, and second generation from Mugabe. Mbuya Chawe, daughter of Chitaura, son of Chachimwe from Wata dynasty, was medium of two spirits, Shinyamira for war and Popular Nehanda for rainmaking. Was consulted on droughts of 1896 with Mondoro Komorunenua, striking alongside Mondoro priestess Zivaguru, who lies instead at Mavuradona Mountains. ZANU-PF post-Mugabe, under the leadership of Mnangagwa, has destroyed most of our heritage sites with no respect to tradition, being of no royal bloodline, but imposing military rule. Securocrats. ZANU-PF has maintained its grip on the state by use of militant tactics, by official backup pre- and post-coup d'etat from the state security in partisan manner, who are deployed under the ZANU-PF Commissariat Department since 2005 in breach of Section 208 of the Constitution, to furthering their interests, causing and prejudicing the lawful interests of opposition parties, to which they infiltrate and relay countermeasures to the junta. Members of the security forces should be non-partisan, national in character, patriotic, professional, and subordinate to the civilian authority as established in Section 219, subsection 3. But the growing political dissatisfaction and dissertation has led to 70% early retirements, resignations among the antagonistic officers. Operations Maguta, Command Agriculture, and Forever Associates of Zimbabwe are pseudonyms of 12,000 active Joint Operations Command personnel using state resources to identify, report any criticism or articulation by opposition against constitutional rights prescribed in sections 58, 59, 60 of the Constitution, and mobilizing support for ZANU-PF in breach of sections 213 and 214 of the Constitution. Zimbabwe Defense Forces mandate in section 212 of the Constitution is to protect Zimbabwe, its people, its national security, interests, territorial integrity, and uphold the Constitution of Zimbabwe, not ZANU-PF. Monsanto Commission, or rather Maduku Commission of Inquiry, on August 2018 military shootings on civilians remains unresolved and lacks independence outlined in section 210 of the Constitution. More than 2 million informal settlers in 2005 were forced removal without compensation or alternative accommodation during Operation Murambatsvina, in strategic bid and move by Central Intelligence Organization Internal Branch to break opposition support base, which was primarily urban. Ruling party. Internal rivalry and successorship within the hierarchy of the Revolutionary Party is a threat to state security and high civil unrest to a degree of bombings witnessed 23 June 2018 at White City Stadium. Traditional protocols and procedures are revamped since 2005 fallout, with Joint Operations Command as backbone of provincial and district structures, with an official integration during 2017 coup d'etat, resorting to dirty tactics on repressive legislation to silence the challenging voices, with frustration in its attempt to legislate a one-party state, nevertheless consolidating its strengths in a de facto one-party state. Matrix within tribal functionalism has created a vacuum of instability and sharp decline to the 600,000 sympathizers support base, plus minus 500 loyal annual subscribers. Internal party elections are conducted and supervised by state security, who disqualify factional renegades, unlike counterpart revolutionary parties like ANC, which conduct democratic presidium primary elections by secret ballot. Disgruntled members are in forced exile, and those are a major threat with security grounds have been eliminated since then, with General Rex Nongomujuru assassinated on 15 August 2011. Parastatal's hunchback from abuse of office by ZANU-PF regime, with major headaches on ZUPCO, NRZ, ZBC, etc., which migrate involuntary homeless vendors to rallies and coverage on party events. 2023 money looting blueprint was not launched with gross incapacitation, with failure to attain at least 20% targeted goals from 2018 manifesto. 2 million jobs translated to 2 million jabs. Free education was gold mafia lecture to all. Opposition. Formation of Unity Accord in 1987 and Government of National Unity in 2008 defined opposition competence and revolts to removal of ZANU-PF regime. In 1983, disgruntled war veterans, or dissidents, as government labeled them, destabilized the country by use of guerrilla tactics to mass destruction of state infrastructure without casualties, with the regime in retaliation deploying 5th Brigade to unleash terror on civilians over frustration to realization of a void military victory. With demise of Father Zimbabwe, Joshua Mkabugo Nyong'ola in 1999, opposition was at peak 2000, led by bona fide Morgan Richard Tsvangirai, who in October 2004 was exonerated by judiciary on treason charges after Eric Ben Menashe divulged such information. Splinter groups of opposition merged 2005, whilst factionalism escalated in succession back within ZANU-PF. Pseudonym Operation 1940 leaked out 2007, leading to surveillance, detention, torture, and assassination of army generals. These include General Gunda, Lifa, Leya in series, among other officials. Coordination of 29 March 2008 harmonized elections led to opposition victory, with 27 June 2008 post-election ricochet on service chiefs prepared to uphold the constitution, with successive mutiny of 2009 Pomona Barracks military armory arms disappearance and 2017 coup experience. To date, Generals Douglas Nikaramba, Trust Mugova, Zimondi, Chief Air Marshal Perence Shiri have since passed on, with Commissioner General Chihuri and CIO Director General Hepton Bonyongwe in exile. Captured opposition from 2009 to 2013 GNU aftermath benefits did not data 2016 to 2017 Tajamuka protests. Tsvangirai's death could not be a coincidence post-coup ahead of 2018 polls, with Mnangagwa anointing talks being facilitated by advocate Nelson Chamisa, who was elevated to MDC Presidium in hijack by the Central Intelligence. Just like Monzora, Biti, Nube, Chavangu, Kupe, and engulfed political actors' dialogue principles, a reminiscence of Muzerewa era. Lack of V11s and V23s evidence in 2018 Constitutional Court was inherited with deformity in 2023 harmonized elections, with ZANU-PF unchallenged. This has been the same between 2018 to 23, with 5 years of hibernation by Tora Mari United, set on conspiracy to annihilate democracy of multiple parties in ambiguous stratagem. At this moment, past is history, future is unification and one voice to remove the regime. Zvakatikoshera kuti at this time tikwanise kubatana, be it Chamisa, be it Kasukwere, be it Monzora, be whoever it is. The ultimate goal is not for opposition to fight against opposition, but for opposition to remove ZANU-PF. Post-mortem on 23 August 2023. Electoral reforms were the keystone to democratic processes to removal of ZANU-PF. Demands of such reforms were shared with the relevant stakeholders, local and international, based on political environment with previous experiences. However, while opposition CCC was engaged alongside the regime. Declaration of results done by ZEC was staged and fake, with minimal changes to 2018 results, with breach of sections 51.3 of the Constitution, with delay and delay in informing the public on polling stations in a motive to confusion and forensic low voter turnout. Participating opposition deployed less than 50% polling agents without adequate training and resources in an environment without final delimitation report and voters' roll. While Ravenous Forever Association of Zimbabwe had over 36,000 deployments in villages alone. Main opposition MDC alliance was not authentic with its splinter group CCC at all polling stations, having no personnel to coordinate and with no capacity to produce V11s and V23 forms similar to 2018 events in disputes. Without structures, voter tabulation was entrusted to Cyber Team Pachelu, a new pseudonym for Baba Jukwa, an extension of state security, and some NGOs raided by CIO. Multi-party system, the backbone of democracy, was not exercised by observer missions who consulted only 3 political parties, namely ZANU-PF, CCC, DUS, out of 15 plus minus participating political parties from a pool of at least 120, and a complete neglect to gender. You don't say that you want to be a president and then you don't do voter tabulation in real time. You should be able to have a shadow cabinet, shadow service chiefs, shadow electoral commission to be helping you on all this in preparing to a swearing in of office. Opposition was not prepared for most of these things. Electoral Commission. Section 5.15 of SADC Principles and Guidelines stipulates independent, adequate logistics, human financial resources, and contingencies made available for the entire electoral cycle, including the authority to recruit, train, and build capacity of permanent and temporary electoral staff. Public Service Commission, chaired by Defense Forces Commission in terms of Section 217 of the Constitution, controlled the recruitment of electoral staff drawn from Joint Operations Command with direct affiliation to ZANU-PF. Conduct and transparency of ZEC towards electoral reforms, nomination fees, voter registration, voter education, delimitation, postal voting, voters' roll, ballot printing and distribution, vote counting, tabulation, and proclamation of results was in violation of Article 4C of the SADC Treaty, which provides for the fundamental principles of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, to which ZEC was in breach of Sections 80, 233, 234, 235, 236, 239, 241, and 323. Judiciary. Sections 164 and 165 warrant independence of judiciary, to which the judges appointed in terms of Section 180 are captured by ZANU-PF with 400,000 US dollar tokens, among other packages being given to them. Rule of law is a major concern in Zimbabwe, with a captured judiciary in retirement controversy and parliament. Recommendation to admittance to Commonwealth must be joining the International Criminal Court, who were to uphold democratic processes. Laws against humanity are crafted and passed overnight in captured parliament as statutory instruments to suit regime needs without adherence to Section 328 and inclusion of electorate by referendum. 2013 Constitution is revamped to colonial laws by Ian Smith, with Defense Act, Police Act, and Prison Act of 1972 still in force, with members of afflicted organizations obliging to human terror or facing repercussions in exercise of their duties should they fail to take the commands. Human rights. Zimbabwe ranks 153 out of 165 countries on human rights violations, from genocides, torture, rape, abductions, incarcerations, and assassinations, which are a daily norm, inflicting 3 million citizens to exile in seek of asylum and refugee status, where they fall to xenophobic attacks, and in some cases, burnt alive, as in the case of Elvis Nyati in April 2022 in South Africa. Constitutional adherence, democratic environment is toxic for journalists among alternative voices who are on surveillance, with state and opposition parties, predators of press freedom, in strategic battle to churn out acceptable narratives. Section 61 of Zimbabwe's Constitution provides for freedom of expression and freedom of the media, while Section 44 imposes an obligation on the state and every agency of the government to respect, protect, and promote and fulfill the rights and freedoms set out in the Charter. Whereabouts of Itai Dzamara are still unknown, with recently released job seeker having been incarcerated over 600 days, while representing Mo Blessing Ali, who was butchered by ZANU-PF. Political activists among students are currently incarcerated without trial, denied bail. They range from 1 month to 12 years jail time. Among them are defected securocrats awaiting court-martial with no justice. 9%, equating to 1.8 million of citizens, are persons with disabilities, with about 300% school-aged dropping out by 3rd grade on discriminatory laws, by de facto inclusion from curriculums to facilities, with crisis extension to accessible, user-friendly transport and state institutions. Formal employment is zero, with majority resorting to vending than begging. In some cases, goods produced by the PWDs are confiscated by the state. Adherence to UN Article 29 relating to Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities to protect the rights of persons with disabilities to vote by secret ballot in elections and public referendums without intimidation, voting procedures, facilities, and appropriate materials accessible to stand for elections, to facilitate the use of assistive and new technologies where appropriate, to which the Zimbabwe government has failed to implement past decades, with traumatic experiences being witnessed on 23-24 August of 2023. Economy. Economic Structural Adjustment Program, introduced 1991 by regime, targeted to revitalize economy by 1995. Quasi-fiscal deployments of troops to DRC war, indigenization, and Land Reform Acts of 1998 and 2002 led to hyperinflation, fuel shortages, deindustrialization, unemployment, 2003 to 2013, Dr. Gideon Gono became the de facto Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, undermining investors and citizens, committing atrocious economic crimes, with his successor, Mangujga, putting the last nail in the coffin. Mining sector accounts to 12% of the country's GDP, with over diversified 40 different minerals, predominant being 2.8 billion tons of platinum and 10 billion of high-grade chromium, 15 billion US dollars diamond revenue went missing with no accountability, and the figures have since accumulated. Gold mafia exposure by Al Jazeera on corruption by regime is all of a sudden now water under the bridge. Kuvundutsa vanhu ka. Industry and commerce, health sector, local authority, education, energy, a colonial inheritance have collapsed from corruption. Tenders are a loophole to diversion of funds with ignominy to Right Act. There is no accountability and transparency from taxation by Zimbra, Zinara, etc., with over 10 billion revenue lost annually and escalating inflation on daily basis. Citizens are suffering and can't afford basic meals or services. Way forward. Fresh elections within constitutional, regional and international standards must be conducted by June 2024, monitored and supervised by the United Nations in revised electoral reforms from a deep political crisis that requires extraordinary measures from a legitimacy crisis of 23-24 August 2023 fraudulent elections. Political infiltrations and human rights violations past 4 years with failure to uphold the rule of law will never cease under the ZANU-PF regime. Opposition and activists, respectively, have been facing rigged elections with no alternative. In most cases, no efforts have been done to hold democratic elections. Resolutions 445 and 448 passed by United Nations Security Council during 1979 on sanctions and fresh elections must, without compromise in recognition of events through extraordinary sanction, be inflicted upon Zimbabwe 2024 with urgency. World Bank, IMF must freeze remittances and ban illegal use of foreign currency by government. Its citizens are being exploited from healthcare, education, bills, etc., while the junta is doing money laundering and promoting terrorist activities. Traditional sanctions have been effected by sole custodians of this country. And this is not the hour for opposition to battle within, but collective effort to bring fruition of a revolution. Official petition and submission for fresh elections has been filed to the United Nations with supporting evidence from observer mission reports of August 2023 harmonized elections, with the main organs, particularly SADC and the African Union, who should officially denounce the elections for fresh polls. December 1974, the Organization of African Unity mandated Zanda and Zipra to unite and fight jointly to the formation of the Zimbabwe People's Army, with joint operations of command, a total of 18, to defeat the Smith regime. Unity of purpose across all stakeholders is key and paramount in our quest for democracy, with neither undermining nor mauling each other apart. Under sections 58 and 59 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, everyone has the right to freedom of assembly, demonstrate, and to present petitions exercised peacefully in accordance with the Public Order Security Act and compliance to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Fresh elections are in the pipeline. Bureaucrats must respect our democratic route and protect citizens' rights in forthcoming long overdue peaceful protests and mass demonstrations, which must not be prohibited based on anticipation of violence or by infringement from army. If they dare this time around, lest they forget unresolved previous atrocities. We cannot talk of 2028 elections when the scandalous acts of 2018 and 2023 are not resolved. Fresh elections must be held by June 2024. I challenge fellow opposition to look beyond our differences and unite to oust the ZANU-PF regime. The country will never die, but the young people shall save it. And for these freedoms, we will fight for, side by side, throughout our lives, until we have won our liberty. I thank you.